Hey guys, it's Jamie here to talk about contributing to schol development. So in part one of the contributing video series, we'll just do two videos, we talked about how to develop new templates for schol. Today we'll talk a little bit about developing the schol command line interface itself, not templates, but the program itself. So to get started, you'll need Git, Node, a text editor, and a terminal, so basic development tools. A good way to start is by either cloning the repo itself and just starting to hack away on the cloned repo, or if you're thinking you might want to actually submit your changes back into the core schol repository, you might first want to fork the schol repository. So let's start by doing that. So we'll go to the schol repo, and just for reference, the contributing guide is available from the schol repo homepage as well. So we'll fork this repo. And once that's done, now we'll clone a copy of our fork. So that's done. All right, so now we have a copy of our fork. I should go back to the contributing guide. So we've created our local clone of the fork. And now we want to work on any changes we want. So in order to do that, we would kind of follow the standard developing guide. So we need to install Schol's dependencies first, which are managed with npm. So npm install will do that for us. Okay, so now that schol is installed, if we'd like, we can link it so that we can use it from the command line. So right now I have a global version of schol installed, and we can see that by, if I just type schol, it'll show the help information for schol, and then which schol will show us where that's running from. So that's running from our sort of our base path for Node.js global programs. So if we want to instead link our local version of schol to the global command, we just, in the local version that we have, we just go link, npm link. Information on npm's commands like link are all available online, so you can always just look that up if you want more info on what it does. But it'll basically link the package in the folder that we're in to the global npm namespace. And so then references to schol globally should refer back to this repository. Oh, right, let's see. So as you can see, if we actually look at the directory that the global schol command eventually links through to, it actually comes back to this directory that was just created today at 229 or 233 for the latest installation. So that's the version that we're working in right now. So it all links back here. So if we make changes now to our code in this local repo and run schol, those changes will be reflected in the global schol executable. So just for example, we now see hi there printed before anything else is done. Okay, so to get into the details of developing schol is going to be a little bit beyond the scope of this video, but I will just give a really high-level overview. So schol uses the yargs dependency to handle command line option parsing and run handlers for commands that the command line interface supports. So in this case, the init command spins up a Yeoman templater that will create a new schol project. The edit command will use citation.js and metalsmith to create a document that is automatically citing all your references for you and then turning your document from Markdown into HTML and serving it up in your browser. So edit will handle that for you. That's all handled in the handler function. And render does the same thing, except it does not spin up a web browser. So it basically does the same thing that edit does, just no browser. And then there's a few helper functions. So there's a function that processes the citations. It's structured as a middleware for metalsmith. So metalsmith sort of does the heavy lifting of the file processing, going from Markdown to HTML. There's a special Markdown parser that, it's not really a parser, it's a handler that handles the turning Markdown files into HTML essentially, and it includes citation processing, creates permalinks and anchors for headings in your Markdown, and will insert a table of contents if you requested it. This would be a good place if you want to add functionality like, say, parsing LaTeX and and rendering it in the document, you would want to add that functionality here using a Markdown It plugin that handles and parses and renders latex. So this would be a pretty common spot for extensions. And then building the bibliography itself. So once citation.js parses everything, it's got to actually build the bibliography and attach it to each file reference. And that's what this helper does. There's a few other helpers as well, but we won't get into the details there. So yeah, if you wanted to make some changes in here, you would do that. You'd save the changes. And then always remember to run the tests with npm test. If you break the tests, you should write new tests to handle what broke. You might have to change the existing tests if you've changed the functionality in a way that breaks the existing tests. If you add functionality, add tests. The tests right now just go through kind of a basic workflow of the command line interface. And they basically just check that the output of the files is sort of the same as expected, and expected is what they sort of output, what schol output earlier in its development. So basically this is just saying, if things have changed quite a bit with the development you've done, the test will break. And it's kind of a hint that, something's gone wrong, you've changed something sufficiently that you might want to take another look at the tests and make sure what you've changed is not breaking the interface itself and is just sort of changing the functionality. And then that's okay, you just kind of update the test fixtures, which would be, the output from schol and schol init and stuff like that. So. Okay, so then once we've made some changes, assuming we have made some changes, we would commit them. So git add, right? Git commit, and git push the changes back to the fork. And then once you've pushed the changes back to the fork that you created earlier in the process, then we'd create a pull request to request that the changes in that fork get pulled back into the main schol repo. So going over the details of how to create a pull request is, again, sort of beyond the scope of this video. It's supposed to just be a sort of a short intro video as to how the process works. But it's pretty well outlined by GitHub, and it's pretty simple to do. So you'd be able to just follow the instructions here once your fork contains your changes, to request that they be pulled back into the main schol repo. So that covers part 2 of the developing schol video series. This should just give you a bit of an intro as to how to contribute to schol development. Thanks for listening.